Picture this. It's 793 AD, and Viking raiders have just destroyed the monastery at Lindisfarne, burning buildings and scattering the monks who flee, carrying only the most precious manuscripts they can save. Among the survivors is Brother Cuthbert, who risks his life to rescue a copy of the Gospels that took 12 years to create, knowing that this single book represents irreplaceable knowledge that could be lost forever if he fails to protect it. This scene was repeated countless times throughout the medieval period, as monks faced invasions, fires, floods, and political upheavals that threatened to destroy the accumulated knowledge of ancient civilizations. Yet somehow these religious communities managed to preserve thousands of texts through centuries of chaos, maintaining libraries that kept classical learning alive when secular institutions collapsed around them. How did they do it? What systems and techniques allowed medieval monks to become Europe's librarians, preserving books that contained the knowledge of Greek philosophers, Roman historians, and early Christian theologians? The answer lies in sophisticated preservation systems that combined religious devotion with practical knowledge management, creating institutional approaches to book conservation that were remarkably effective given medieval technological limitations. Monastic communities understood that preserving knowledge was both a religious obligation and a practical necessity for maintaining their intellectual traditions, leading them to develop systematic approaches to manuscript copying, storage, and protection that ensured literary survival during Europe's most turbulent centuries. Medieval monastic book preservation began with theological frameworks that viewed knowledge conservation as essential religious duty, deserving significant institutional resources and personal sacrifice. Monks understood that preserving texts was a form of spiritual service that honored God while serving humanity, creating powerful motivations for dedicating enormous time and effort to copying and protecting manuscripts. The scriptoriums operated by medieval monasteries were sophisticated production facilities that combined workshop organization with quality control systems to ensure accurate copying of texts, while maintaining production schedules that could complete major works within reasonable timeframes. These weren't casual copying operations, but systematic manufacturing processes that required skilled workers, specialized equipment, and careful supervision. But here's where medieval book preservation becomes truly remarkable. These monastic communities developed comprehensive approaches to knowledge management that included acquisition, copying, storage, and distribution systems that functioned across international networks spanning multiple continents. They created the first systematic libraries that used cataloging, indexing, and preservation techniques that anticipated modern library science. The manuscript acquisition strategies used by medieval monasteries involved complex networks of relationships with other religious institutions, scholarly communities, and wealthy patrons who could provide access to rare texts that needed copying and preservation. These acquisition systems required diplomatic skills, financial resources, and scholarly expertise to identify and obtain manuscripts worth preserving. International manuscript exchange programs allowed monasteries to share texts across vast geographical distances, creating cooperative preservation networks that ensured multiple copies of important works existed in different locations. These exchange systems reduced the risk that single disasters could destroy unique texts while spreading preservation costs across multiple institutions. The selection processes that determined which texts received copying priority involved sophisticated judgments about literary value, practical utility, and preservation urgency that required extensive scholarly knowledge and institutional planning. Monks had to balance religious priorities with practical considerations while making decisions that would affect knowledge preservation for centuries. Religious text priorities naturally received primary attention in monastic scriptoriums, but many monasteries also preserved classical works, medical texts, and practical knowledge that served broader educational and cultural purposes. This broader preservation mission ensured that secular knowledge survived alongside religious literature. The copying techniques developed in medieval scriptoriums achieved remarkable accuracy through systematic procedures that included proofreading, correction, and quality verification processes. Master scribes developed standardized methods for avoiding copying errors while maintaining production speeds that could complete major works within practical timeframes. Multiple scribe coordination systems allowed monasteries to divide large copying projects among several scribes working simultaneously on different sections of the same text. This coordination required careful planning to ensure consistency in style, format, and accuracy while managing complex scheduling that kept all scribes productively employed. The material science knowledge required for medieval book preservation included understanding of parchment production, ink formulation, and binding techniques that could create durable books capable of surviving for centuries under proper storage conditions. Monks developed sophisticated knowledge about materials that would resist decay, insect damage, and environmental deterioration. Parchment preparation was a specialized craft that required knowledge of animal skin processing, chemical treatment, and surface preparation that could create writing materials suitable for long-term preservation. High-quality parchment was expensive but essential for creating books that would survive for centuries. Ink formulation required understanding of chemistry and materials science that could produce writing media that would remain legible for centuries without fading, running, or deteriorating. Different ink recipes were developed for various purposes, with the most durable formulations reserved for the most important texts. Binding techniques developed in monastic workshops created protective covers that could preserve manuscript pages while allowing regular use for reading and study. These bindings required skilled craftsmanship and quality materials that represented significant investments in individual book preservation. The storage systems used in medieval monastic libraries were designed to protect books from environmental threats, including moisture, temperature fluctuations, insect damage, and fire, while maintaining accessibility for scholarly use. These storage systems reflected sophisticated understanding of preservation principles that anticipated modern archival science. Climate control in medieval libraries involved architectural design that could maintain stable temperature and humidity conditions using passive environmental management techniques. Many monastery libraries were built with thick stone walls, optimal window placement, and ventilation systems that minimized environmental fluctuations. Fire prevention systems in monastic libraries included architectural features, safety protocols, and emergency procedures designed to minimize fire risks, while providing rapid response capabilities when fires did occur. These systems were essential because fire represented the greatest single threat to manuscript collections. Security measures for protecting valuable manuscript collections included physical security, access controls, and inventory management systems that prevented theft while ensuring accountability for valuable books. Some manuscripts were so valuable that they were secured with chains or stored in locked chests that required multiple keys to open. The cataloging systems developed by medieval monasteries created the first systematic approaches to library organization that allowed efficient location and management of large manuscript collections. These cataloging systems required intellectual organization and record-keeping skills that anticipated modern library science principles. Inventory management systems tracked manuscript locations, condition, and usage patterns that allowed librarians to monitor collection status while planning conservation work and acquisition priorities. These systems were essential for managing collections that could include thousands of individual manuscripts. The conservation techniques used in medieval monasteries included repair methods, protective treatments, and restoration procedures that could extend manuscript lifespans while maintaining readability and usability. These conservation skills required specialized knowledge about materials, deterioration patterns, and repair techniques that could restore damaged books. Damage assessment and repair prioritization systems allowed monastic conservators to focus their limited resources on the most important and endangered manuscripts, while developing repair schedules that could address conservation needs systematically over time. The educational programs operated by monastic scriptoriums trained new generations of scribes, illuminators, and conservators who could continue preservation work, while maintaining quality standards that ensured accurate copying and proper book care. These training programs were essential for sustaining preservation efforts over centuries. Apprenticeship systems in monastic scriptoriums provided structured education that combined theoretical knowledge with practical experience under master supervision. These programs ensured that preservation skills were transmitted accurately, while developing qualified personnel who could manage complex copying and conservation projects. The economic systems that funded medieval book preservation included diverse revenue sources that could sustain expensive copying operations while supporting the scribes, materials, and facilities required for large-scale preservation efforts. These funding systems were essential because book preservation required enormous ongoing investments that individual monasteries couldn't sustain alone. Patron relationships with wealthy donors provided funding for specific copying projects while generating ongoing support for preservation activities. These relationships required diplomatic skills and scholarly credibility that could convince donors to invest in preservation efforts that might not provide immediate practical benefits. The technological innovations developed in monastic scriptoriums included improvements in copying techniques, materials production, and workflow organization that increased efficiency while maintaining quality standards. These innovations often spread between monasteries through networks that shared technical knowledge and best practices. Tool development for manuscript copying included specialized pens, rulers, and cutting instruments that could improve copying accuracy while increasing production speeds. These tools were often crafted by monastery workshops that understood the specific requirements of scribal work. International preservation networks connecting different monastic communities created cooperative systems that could coordinate preservation efforts across vast geographical areas while sharing resources and expertise that individual institutions couldn't provide alone. These networks were essential for preserving knowledge that required resources beyond single institution capabilities. Knowledge transfer between monasteries occurred through traveling scholars, manuscript exchanges, and correspondence networks that allowed preservation techniques and scholarly discoveries to spread rapidly across international religious communities. Medieval monastic book preservation established precedents for modern library science, archival management, and cultural heritage conservation that continue to influence contemporary approaches to knowledge preservation. The emphasis on systematic organization, quality control, and institutional commitment evolved directly from monastic preservation traditions. Most importantly, medieval monks demonstrated that preserving knowledge requires institutional dedication, systematic approaches, and long-term commitment that transcends individual lifespans while serving broader cultural and educational purposes that benefit entire civilizations. So how did medieval monks preserve books through dark ages? They developed comprehensive preservation systems that combined religious motivation with practical knowledge management to create institutional approaches to book conservation that saved classical learning while establishing foundations for modern library science and cultural heritage preservation. They proved that knowledge preservation depends more on institutional commitment and systematic organization than on advanced technology, creating preservation systems that maintained literary traditions through centuries of political upheaval, while ensuring that ancient wisdom remained available for future generations who would build upon preserved knowledge to advance human civilization. The next time you visit a library or appreciate access to ancient texts, remember the medieval monk who spent decades copying manuscripts by hand, developing preservation techniques that saved classical knowledge from destruction while creating institutional systems that established foundations for modern approaches to cultural heritage conservation and scholarly research. If you enjoy the hidden sides of medieval life, hit subscribe and give this video a like.